As the cerulean curtain of daylight slipped beneath the horizon, Adrian watched the gentle light yield to an enveloping shroud of twilight. The quiescent town of New Haven, Connecticut, transformed under the pall of dusk. The skeletal branches of trees tracing macabre patterns on weathered cobblestone streets, their whispers borne on the chill wind like ghosts of the night. Adrian, an erstwhile soldier now private investigator, found himself on these spectral streets, summoned by hushed whispers and fearful pleas of the local folks. He was a tall man, his once robust frame now bearing the weight of an unseen past. His sea-green eyes held a depth, mirroring his own battle-scarred psyche. He was a veteran of conflict not just from the battlefields, but from personal turmoil that clung to him like a specter. The town hall stood stark against the gloaming, a monolith touched by the dwindling sunlight. It was here that he was greeted by the townsfolk. The mayor, a woman of advanced years yet commanding presence, clasped his hand. "Adrian, we're counting on you," she murmured, the lines on her face deepening with worry. He offered a nod of reassurance, his voice soothing. "I will do everything in my power, Mayor Cassidy." In the dimly lit town hall, he listened to the townsfolk's accounts. A young mother spoke of her nightly walks home, her words laden with trepidation. "I saw her, Mr. Adrian. A shadow, sobbing by the morgue. Chilling it was to the very marrow." An elderly man followed, lights moving in the morgue's windows, long after midnight. He shuddered, his gaze vacant. Listening, Adrian felt a prickle of unease beneath his calm facade. Yet his empathy outweighed the cold dread creeping in. PTSD, his constant companion, stirred within him, but he soothed it with practiced ease. His trauma was not his weakness, but his armor, making him a beacon of understanding in the growing gloom. As the evening waned into night, he felt the weight of the task set before him. Yet, he would not be dissuaded. He had come to New Haven carrying his own ghosts, his open mind and stalwart heart acting as his bulwark against the terrors of the unknown. The phantom occurrences swirling around the morgue were like a puzzle, a challenge that he found impossible to resist. "Your fears have been heard, and they will not go unaddressed," he promised the townsfolk as they dispersed, their expressions a mix of relief and apprehension. Alone in the echo of their concerns, he stood at the precipice of a shadow-laden mystery, the town's morgue looming large in his thoughts as the darkness of the night deepened. Under the aegis of a moon waxing into full bloom, New Haven transformed into an enigmatic landscape. Adrian found himself before the morgue, its stony facade bathed in a spectral luminescence that lent it an uncanny air. Time seemed to hold its breath around the silent building, as if the world itself feared to disturb the sleep of the departed. Armed with only a flashlight and his indomitable spirit, he approached the morgue. The building was an antique, a relic of a bygone era, its once elegant architecture now succumbing to the relentless march of time. He paused at the entrance, his hand hovering over the worn brass doorknob. He felt the familiar thrill of the unknown, a sense of danger interlaced with a profound curiosity that had guided him into the depths of human nature and, oftentimes, into the belly of his own demons. Once inside, he found himself ensnared in a dense quiet, the kind that clings to places untouched by daylight. Shadows grew thick and deep, pooling in the corners and crevices of the room. He could almost taste the spectral chill in the air, a silence so profound it was as if sound itself had been embalmed. As the night advanced, strange occurrences unfolded. A faint echo of a cry, a figure passing by the window, a cold spot that made his skin erupt in goosebumps. Each occurrence, a tendril of unease coiling around his heart. PTSD, his unwanted shadow, flared and recoiled, a dance he had become all too familiar with. In the quiet hours, he wandered through the corridors, his footfall a hollow echo. He found himself in front of a locked door, worn by time, yet bearing an air of solemn importance. Its existence seemed a secret whispered by the shadows. His heart echoed with the forgotten stories it held, a mystery that called to his investigator's instinct. Outside, as he stood lost in thought, he heard an indistinct murmur, a susurrus in the wind that had his hair standing on end. He turned, eyes scanning the shadow-clad streets, his pulse thrumming in his ears. It was then he saw it, a flickering light moving in a swift trajectory into the ground below the morgue, the faint strains of an anguished wail echoing in its wake. His breath hitched and he stood, a sentinel beneath the waxen moon, staring at the spot where the ghostly light had disappeared. His thoughts spun wild as his heart raced, the once forgotten tales of the townsfolk taking a horrifying shape in the palpable darkness. As the ghostly echoes died away, he was left with a chilling sense of foreboding. He knew with a certainty that froze his blood that he had stumbled onto a path that wound into the belly of a terrifying unknown. As night deepened, wrapping New Haven in a cloak of obsidian, Adrian, the solitary sentinel, found himself drawn to the spectral trail leading into the morgue's underbelly. Each step took him further away from the comforting familiarity of the world he knew and closer to a realm that thrummed with an uncanny resonance. His journey led him to a hidden passageway beneath the morgue, a labyrinthine descent of stone and shadow. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic, a hint of rust or perhaps blood. It was in these subterranean depths that he encountered the true horror that lurked beneath New Haven. In a cavernous chamber, illuminated by the unholy glow of flickering torches, he found them, a gathering of figures. With their faces obscured by grotesque masks, they stood hunched over a feast, their feeding frenzy a symphony of gnashing teeth and wet, slavering noises that echoed horrifically in the confines of the chamber. Adrian recoiled at the scene before him, his pulse roaring in his ears. He forced himself to look again, a slow, terrible understanding uncoiling in his gut. It was a cannibalistic feast that the cult relished, their delight echoing in the underground chamber, bouncing off the cold stone walls. He retreated into the shadows, fear crawling up his spine, a primal instinct screaming at him to flee. Yet he did not, for among the grotesquerie, he found a perverse fascination. It was a scene so horrifyingly surreal that it held him captive, a moth entranced by the glow of a deadly flame. His PTSD roused like a slumbering beast, each crunching bone and anguished scream igniting old wounds. Yet he reined in his panic, his resolve a brittle shield against the encroaching horror. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the cold, dread-infused air of the chamber. He was an investigator, a seeker of truth. Even in the face of such nightmarish revelations, his duty remained. He found himself drawn further into the depths of the cult's den, the darkness welcoming him, an initiate stepping into the realm of the forbidden. As Adrian emerged from the catacombs into the chill of dawn, he was not the same man who had descended into the abyss. He carried with him a horrific truth, a grotesque reality that lurked beneath the quiet streets of New Haven. The morgue, an edifice of dread, stood silent, basking in the cold light of dawn, its sinister secret concealed beneath its stony visage. The day seemed to crawl at a glacial pace, the town oblivious to the impending confrontation that loomed in the shadowy horizon. He moved through the town, the echoes of the horrifying feast still rattling in his bones. The mundanity of the town's routine held a surreal quality now, as if he was a specter moving among the living. His PTSD, an unwelcome guest, stirred within him. His past traumas, once confined to the battlefields and locked away in the recesses of his mind, surfaced. Yet these phantoms of the past were not a liability. Instead, they reminded him of the resilience he'd found in the face of unspeakable horrors. They fueled his resolve, acting as the crucible to his evolving courage. He spent the day preparing for the confrontation. His encounters with the townsfolk were tinged with a somber undertone, their innocent inquiries and concerns weaving a bittersweet symphony of normalcy and impending dread. He reassured them with the warmth in his gaze and the firm set of his shoulders, a promise of safety unsaid but not unnoticed. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms on the cobblestone streets, he found himself standing before the morgue once more. The building, innocuous in the dying light, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing the countdown to his showdown with the cult. The thin line between fear and excitement blurred, a potent cocktail that kept him rooted in his resolution. The final moments of daylight clung to the horizon as he descended back into the underbelly of the morgue. The underground chamber, still reeking of the horrifying feast, held an eerie stillness. Yet the shadows seemed to hum with a premonitory silence, a harbinger of the chaos to come. In the cavernous belly of the morgue, a silence hung like a pall. Adrian stood in the heart of this silence, its rhythmic pulse mirroring his own. The foreboding air was thick, a primal sense of impending danger permeating the cold stone walls. His mind echoed with the grotesque revelations from the previous night, memories coiling like serpents in the murky depths of his consciousness. The cult arrived as the hour neared midnight. Their presence filled the chamber, a palpable wave of dread washing over him. He was vastly outnumbered, a lone figure standing against the tide of an unholy congregation. The feast began, the horrid spectacle unfolding in a macabre tableau of gnashing teeth and raw, bleeding flesh. The air grew heavy with a primal, animalistic energy, the walls echoing with a symphony of the damned. As a beleaguered sentinel, he stood rooted in place, a solitary figure bathed in the flickering glow of unholy torches. His PTSD flared, old battlefields blooming in his psyche, their horrors dwarfed by the sight before him. But he did not flinch. He drew on his wellspring of courage, the darkness in his soul battling the abomination unfolding before him. Then in the depth of despair, a curious sensation overcame him. It wasn't fear, but fascination. The eldritch allure of the spectacle began to draw him in, a morbid curiosity whispering in his ear. He was at the edge of a precipice, the chasm of cosmic horror yawning before him. In the face of the cult's monstrous banquet, he felt the boundaries of his humanity slowly disintegrating. He found himself teetering on the verge of the abyss, its dark allure beckoning him. The transformation was insidious, a darkness that crept into his soul, a whisper in the dark. The fear that once rooted him in place shifted, morphing into a strange understanding. The cruel feast before him was not just a spectacle of terror, but a bizarre baptism into a world beyond his understanding. His terror waned, replaced by an alluring sense of belonging. The abyss had gazed back, and Adrian, the once steadfast sentinel, found himself irrevocably drawn into its depths. He became a part of the spectacle, his resolve not breaking, but transforming. The confrontation had not ended in a clash of violence, but in the silent acceptance of a man who had peered into the heart of cosmic horror and found a piece of himself within. Adrian stood among the cult, his silhouette merging with the darkness. The once quiet town of New Haven rested unaware of the monstrous truth beneath its tranquil surface. The sun would rise again, casting its light upon the town and its secret, etching the silhouette of the solitary figure against the secrets hidden beneath. A new dawn, and with it, the birth of a man who walked into the heart of cosmic horror and became one with it. We appreciate you tuning in. If you fancied the content, show your support with a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to keep up with our eerie adventures. Eldritch Tales Factory has plenty more to offer. Until next time.